Think about all of these mass shootings we're having in our country. If those were people that were Muslim, foreign extremists, or even homegrown extremists, and not just everyday crazy kids that are going around shooting the city and other cities, Congress would be tripping over itself to close the gun show loophole, to have a real universal background check, to do a myriad of things to help keep firearms in the hands of law-abiding Americans of sound mind, not of the hands of people who don't belong having firearms. And so we need Congress to do its job, and we need them to act. Pretend that it's foreign extremists that are shooting up our cities instead of Americans.
Wow. All right. Miami's police chief, Art Acevedo, with those comments yesterday. They come as cities struggle to get the crime crisis under control across the nation, a topic on the front page of this morning's Washington Post. Shootings and killings spiked during the shutdown. Leaders had hoped the violence would subside as cities reopened, but it has not. Between guns, poverty, and police being back on their heels, officials have failed to reach a consensus on the reason for the surge. The mayor of Austin tells the paper, quote, the tools for fighting back are limited without state and federal help. This comes as President Biden is expected to deliver remarks today on his strategy to respond to the nation's surge in gun violence. Joining us now, White House senior advisor and director of the Office of Public Engagement, Cedric Richmond. Also with us, national political reporter on the Washington Post's breaking news team, Eugene Scott, and NBC's Casey Hunt back with us as well. Good to have you all on board. So, sir, I'll start with you. What is the approach on the administration's front to try and combat the violence, the surge in violence across the country, and balancing that with the very, very careful situation we need to navigate with the nation's police forces?
Well, we have a comprehensive strategy, and President Biden is very forward leaning into this. First, we're going to make sure that we look at gun dealers, rogue gun dealers that are selling guns to people who should not get them. Second, we're going to do ATF task forces to look at violent crime and help these cities combat it. Three, we're going to put resources in the community so that we do crime prevention programs, community violence intervention, that we create summer job programs, we invest in recreation, we do those things that prevent crime on the front end. But we're also going to deal with those that are out there that are breaking the law all at the same time. And so the president will lay that out today. We're concerned about the 30% increase in homicides over the last 18 months. And so this is something that we know the human toll that it takes on families. We know the pain that it causes, and we know the disruption that it causes in the communities, and we want to make sure that we deal with it.
So let's talk about the rogue gun sellers, because that is such an important part of this story that we just never seem to talk about. When there's gun debates, it's about what type of guns do we want to ban, or what type of background checks do we want to expand. And most Americans want to expand. I think there's agreement on expanding background checks among most Americans. But 9 out of 10 crimes that are committed with a gun are not committed by a person who bought the gun. They're illegal guns. So what are some of the plans to crack down on that you're talking about?
Well, the amazing part is that ATF has an idea, and a lot of the local mayors have an idea who the bad actors are. But in the past, ATF has not gone after them. And so what the president is going to announce today...
Why not?
I'm not sure, but we are. That's the main part. So you will hear the Attorney General talk today about efforts that they will use. You'll hear the president talk about efforts and their focus. Our focus is to make sure that those gun dealers, that we have zero tolerance with them.
Yeah.
So,
Casey.
Mr. Richmond, what do you think is the root of the cause of this spike in violence? I mean, we read through some of these cities don't know. From the administration's perspective, why is this happening?
Well, look, a bunch of reasons, I believe, but one is the proliferation of guns on the streets of America. The fact that we have let the NRA govern this country for far too long, and the president is willing to take them on directly. Two, we need to make sure that we're investing in our children, that we're giving them summer job programs, recreation programs, education programs. So our strategy to fight crime is to prevent it from happening in the first place. And we're going to invest in police also.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, to what extent do you think this is police being concerned that if they do something? I mean, the defund the police movement, certainly it's had an impact here in Washington, D.C. Do you think that has anything to do with the rise in crime?
I don't. But what I will say on that is, even during the height of the defund the police during the campaign, President Biden said that he wanted to put $300 million more into community policing. We want to make sure we protect black and brown communities, all communities. And in order to do that, you have to do it with policing. But we want the policing to be constitutional, and we want it to be just. But at the same time, we want to protect those communities. That's why the ARP money, mayors can use the ARP money to hire police, which far too many had to lay them off during the pandemic. And we're not going to let Republicans repurpose that money and take it away from these mayors and states that can use it for crime prevention.
Eugene, I know you have a question, but first let's talk really quickly about the New York City mayor's race.
Sure.
Right? New York, like liberal bastion of all liberal bastions, right? They picked the most conservative candidate when it came to crime. Yeah, and you're seeing this in all communities, a concern about this growing crime wave. This looks like this could be a really big issue in 2022.
Absolutely, and not just in New York, but just nationally. I was in New York Monday, and we know that it has this reputation of being this liberal bastion, but it's more politically diverse, especially on the left, than people realize. And homicide, gun violence, is an issue that many liberals really care about, and they want to see solutions. And many of the candidates offered very different solutions, and the more conservative ones seem to gain traction. And you were mentioning Republicans earlier. We know that this is something we've seen Republicans and Democrats talk about, the rise in crime and gun violence in cities. And we know that the Biden administration has been very vocal about their desire to work with Republicans. We've seen mixed success so far. What do you think needs to be done to get Republicans on board with what the Biden administration wants to do related to this issue right now?
Well, we're going to stress what we want to do. They can come along, or we're going to do it anyway. Because we know how important this is. So community violence intervention is very important, and it's very effective. And so we're going to keep doing those things that will prevent crime in the first place. But no matter how liberal you are, you want to live in a safe community.
Right.
And we're going to make sure that we do it in a comprehensive manner. So that's our focus, and you'll hear the president really dive into it today.
Mr. Richmond, it's Willie Geist up in New York. As a congressman whose district covered most of the city of New Orleans, you're too familiar with the problem of gun violence. So I'm curious what you think is reasonable in terms of gun safety. I mean, there's the people who want to ban semi-automatic weapons. We know, as Joe just pointed out, that most of gun violence takes place with handguns, which is really the source of the problem. And most people who commit violence with handguns aren't even going through a background check. So we know about people who want to ban semi-automatic rifles. We know about people who want expanded background checks. But how do you get to, as someone who has watched this up close, how do you get to the core of this problem and to begin to solve it?
Well, part of it, and you mentioned some of it, but what you didn't mention, and I'm sure you know, is the capacity of the magazines. So a gun that can hold 10 rounds of ammunition is a lot different than a gun that can hold 15 or 20. And we need to make sure that we look at guns in a comprehensive manner. And President Biden still supports an assault weapons ban. And we need to make sure that we keep guns out of the hands of criminals in the first place. And that's why we're going to crack down on gun dealers. We need to close the gun show loophole, the Charleston loophole, and have universal background checks. Because these American families, these are American citizens that are dying on the streets of this country, and the president is going to do something about it.